Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. And Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Very good. We're going to talk today about one of your most favorite departments in Washington, the Department of Homeland Security. I understand that they're following up on some of these rumors that they would like to get involved in making sure our elections are not rigged. But you and I remember back in those days, right after, I don't know how many months after 9/11 occurred, but not too long after that, they lined up to change things so far forever from 9/11. But you remember exactly when that bill was coming up, and I'm sure it didn't take us a whole long time to figure it out, but I know you read it in detail.
Well, it started at 20-some pages. Then it went to the House, and it became, I think, something like 200 pages. When it was finally passed, it was almost 600 pages. And it was passed with such quickness that it was impossible for anyone to read it. But they promised us that it would streamline government. This was not adding more deck chairs. No, this was streamlining the government. It's going to make it go more smoothly. You, unfortunately, didn't buy into that, and you had a different view. This is you back in 2002. Rest assured that this new department represents a huge increase in the size and scope of the federal government that will be used mostly to serve, to spy on the American people.
Well, that sounds like a pretty good prediction, but, you don't need a real high IQ to figure that out because all you have to do is have a little bit of common sense, know a little bit about government, just observe for a short period of time what's happened to our government, and, those are the conclusions that any rational person should come to. But we didn't have too much support from the Republicans. There were just a few of us, and I think we only have one in the Congress now that actually opposed the Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah, Representative Duncan, who's on the board of the Institute.
Yes, right. But, they're in charge of a lot. I can't name all the agencies, but I do know it's everything from the TSA to the Coast Guard. This is a tremendous amount of responsibility they have. But if you want to talk about expansion and control and centralization of government, I think that it's very clear that is what has happened. And I am quite sure that the number of employees that we have for the government since 9/11 is very much greater, and they're very much involved in our personal lives, our personal privacy, overrunning state laws, the whole works. So this next step to take over elections is pretty scary as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and what they want to do is the Secretary of the Homeland Security Department, Jeh Johnson, said he is looking into designating our election process, our voting system, as, quote, critical infrastructure, which would therefore fall under the purview of Homeland Security. And I think they have 16 other areas of critical infrastructure that they're in charge of. Roads and bridges and reservoirs and things of that nature. So,
well, usually when they come up with something, even war, they have to have a pretext, and the pretext is pretend. How are we going to deceive the people? How are we going to scare the people? So they're having a pretext for this because there has been talk, and most people think the elections are probably rigged. I certainly think they are because no matter what happens, the same deep state controls everything. So our definition of rigging is different from one to another. But, they got involved a little bit in foreign policy in order to, justify this. And it's always national security. And what is it that they're saying now that is justifying what we're doing?
Well, apparently some voter enrolls in Arizona and Illinois were hacked. That would be the names of the addresses of voters and that sort of thing. So it really technically didn't have anything to do with the outcome. At least in Illinois, they're not even connected to the internet when they vote. So it was data about voters. But immediately they said, it was Russian hackers who did it. Without any evidence, they didn't have any evidence that it was. But as you point out, it gives it this foreign dimension. And as we've seen in the media over the past week or so, certainly the Clinton campaign has bent over backwards to try to convince everyone that Putin's hand is inside the Trump puppet,
Right.
So you put the two together and you think, okay, Putin is going to rig the elections for Trump. Therefore, we got to get Homeland Security involved to save us from the rigging.
Yes, and there's also stories, obviously off the wall, that, that if an individual, article saying, well, if one of the candidates dies, but, the elections could be held up pretty easily. I'm not sure that is in the law, but law doesn't mean anything. So it depends on the chaos. And, this goes along with some work that we have done on emergency powers. The president can declare emergency, and he really can take over. This is just more like centralizing those powers into one unit. But the president has ominous powers under declaration, and the Congress doesn't have to vote on that particular thing. They already have. They grant it. If there's a declaration of an emergency, they can do this, and the president can take over, which obviously is on the books, very scary. And now they're doing this. So I'm not predicting. I haven't been in this position of predicting that before November, the really, really big event is going to happen politically. But that doesn't mean it couldn't happen, and they're always working under the assumption that it could happen, and they're going to solidify this and say, well, the Congress gave us this authority, and now there's an emergency. You don't want to have total chaos. There'll be chaos in the streets, and who's going to pass out the orders to our troops overseas? And they'll have all kinds of reasons. So the pretext will be there, and people will be frightened. And unfortunately, I'm afraid too many of them would go along with it.
These kinds of ideas that were just a few years ago considered way out on the fringe now seem pretty mainstream, and with, as you say, the executive branch being granted more power. And of course, there was a lot of power creep toward the executive branch throughout the decades, as you always talked about. But really, it accelerated with 9/11. It really kicked into gear with 9/11. When everyone was so eager to give the president all of this authority.
Yeah. Now, Trump's been talking a little bit about the rigged election, and I believe elections have been rigged, but it's worse than ever. And I think he's correct, but I'm not sure his understanding of the problem and what he thinks should be done is the same. Because my understanding of the rigged election is the elections don't matter. This is a ritual that we go through. And some people say, well, yeah, but you participated. You ran for office. You got in, and maybe you did a little bit of good as an elected official. But I think the big difference is if you go there, that you don't go there to work within the system and believe that you're going to reform it, and all of a sudden you're going to have control of legislation and become a chairman of a committee, and things are going to change. But if a person is involved in the system, I think it has to be for one thing to expose what they're doing. And unfortunately, though, some people think that they can get in and change things. My belief is that the control is the deep state, and people have to realize that. But now that deep state, which seems to be, ushering around the Department of Homeland Security, is manifold. It deals with the media, the military, the medical care system, the whole works, the banking system, and those powers are already there. And I think those individuals who are behind the scenes, who really, find out what the policies are going to be regardless of who's in office, know exactly what we argue, that this place, our country, and our financial system and the foreign policy is very precarious, and something terrible is going to happen. So I think the more you hear about this stuff, the more power given to the Department of Homeland Security. They may have false flags, they may do a lot of things, but no matter how an emergency comes up, they're going to make use of it. And the use of it isn't to say, hey, how are we going to protect the American people? Are they worrying when they talk about doing something about rigged elections to make sure the votes are counted? No, they're making sure that the votes aren't counted and they're irrelevant, and the government has all this power, and that they have, in a way, make it a lot easier to hack into our elections. And even the very first, one of the first elections was in 1976. We had some fancy machines. I don't think they use them anymore. But people came and explained to me exactly how they can set these machines not to be accurate, and they were sort of primitive. So I'm sure that type of thing is available now. And just think of if that can be done at a local level for an election here and there, it's horrible. But can you think of, centralizing it, turning the whole power over to the Department of Homeland Security for protecting us, and make us safe and secure? And the people say, well, we have to be safe and secure, so therefore they'll protect us.
Yeah, and this point we both noticed that John Whitehead, our old friend, wrote about this, that it's rigged no matter what, and it's such a great point. But as you say, it's the Department of Homeland Security that's doing the deeds of the deep state, and what their goal is to rob us of our liberties and to create a police state. And if you don't mind, if I could just read a short paragraph from Whitehead's latest article, because he points out, okay, we're going to be saved from rigging by the Department of Homeland Security. And he points out, Homeland Security is the agency that militarized the police, spied on activists and veterans, distributed license plate readers and cell phone trackers to law enforcement agencies, contracted to build detention centers, conducted virtual strip searches of airline passengers, established Constitution-free border zones, funded citywide surveillance cameras, and generally turned our republic into a police state. So these are the ones that are going to protect our voting rights.
Right. And the TSA has done such a good job. They're very symbolic of how the American people come to love the TSA. Hopefully that symbol, even though it's a big symbol, will wake up the American people. Why do you want the TSA to run our elections? Essentially is what they're doing. It's the same principle. When we take an oath of office and the president takes anybody that goes to office, swears to uphold the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I frequently would bring this up at speeches. And those who came to mine always loved it when I would emphasize the foreign and domestic, and this is where the real enemy is right now. Sure, we have to have a national defense, but I don't agitate and read and study and try to change people's mind, because I think that somebody's going to invade us. I want to change foreign policy so that we are less in danger. But really, the greatest danger since 9/11 has been the taking away of our liberties. Our civil liberties have been undermined, and actually, I personally date the big picture of the economy, a downturn even prior to 9/11, since the turn of the century when we had a stock market bust and the NASDAQ bubble. Mm-hmm. But the 9/11 accelerated that, and it continues. But this will only add fuel to the problems that we have already, whether it's foreign policy. It certainly is going to do nothing to help to protect the civil liberties of the American people. But our big challenge is there are so many people in this country that they think it's the absolute responsibility of government to make us safe and secure and give us a blanket, safety net in order to take care of us, whether it's physically or whether it's from the Russians are coming. Yeah. That is their job, and economically to take care of us. And of course, demanding dependency as a right is what gets us into this mess, and civil liberties become irrelevant. And I'm sure you've heard the arguments, and probably people have called in and you took our calls, and they say, can't Ron understand that you have to give a little bit of liberty in order to be safe? And that's what we need now. We have to be safe. Look at what happened without thinking it through of the reasons why we have become less safe than before. And it's not because the government is too small. It's not because we had overprotection of our civil liberties. It emphasizes the fact that we ought to be concentrating on protecting liberty in this country and understanding just how that comes about, why economic policy is important, and why foreign policy is so important.
Yeah, and just think, back when they were doing the Patriot Act and all this stuff, you were outlining some of the worst case scenarios, and people have called you very alarmist, but that seems very mild compared to what it is. So the whole notion, if I give up a little bit of liberty for my security, if you give up a little bit of liberty, the government's going to come and chomp more and more and more, and that's what's happened.
Yeah, and I think the bigger problem, those people that are eager to vote, and a lot of people vote, and the majority of the American people have some dependency on government. Even those who say too much government here, too much government here, they still think, well, we have to take, we have to get our share, but they don't want to concentrate on, how corporatism has just defied all concepts of free markets, and how the banking industry and the financial system and the Federal Reserve has co-opted this and provided the privileges and the right to steal from the people. But they're still thinking in a very minor, narrow sense that, I have a right to this, I'm entitled to this. Yes, those guys are bad guys, but just take it away from them instead of changing the system which permitted them to do it. Why are there so many lobbyists, and why are the corporations so powerful? It's because everybody's for sale in Washington. If you had a government that was very, very small for the purpose of protecting liberty, and real government, if you needed any, it would be local, the policemen. Now we have the federal police force is 120,000 people carrying guns to enforce these. And just think, most of those guns are now, under one department. That'd be an interesting number to look. How many people that are under the Department of Homeland Security actually carry guns? And I'll bet you there's a lot. And they're always doing, we're protecting the parks, things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report, and I guess you can gather from our little discussion here that we do accept the notion that our elections are rigged, but we certainly don't come down on the side of believing the Department of Homeland Security and TSA will unrig our elections. They're just going to make things much worse, and that is possible, even though some days you wonder, how can they make it worse? But it is a distressing thing to think that probably this is a true statement, that no matter what you do on your vote, whether you vote or not, the deep state is in charge, and that is what we have to deal with. But it is good to be politically active, to preach this message, to show people, exactly what the government's doing to us and why we should be involved. But of course, the whole purpose in the end has to be that we change our economic philosophy, we change our attitude about our protection of our civil liberties, and we change our attitude about getting involved in the internal affairs of other nations, occupying other countries, and being involved in nation building. We do those three little things, and believe me, the world would be much more peaceful, and we would all be much more prosperous. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.